Children's Health Part 3. In Children's Health Part 3, we're going to be looking at food. In our first presentation, we established the importance of the parents presenting a united front. We also looked at the importance of training and guidelines with a child, especially starting early. Because if you don't have any control over your child, that's the child that, of course, brings a shame to the mother and to the father. If you don't have any control over your child, then it is very difficult to have control over them at the table. And I have come to the conclusions that parents dictate the tastes of their children. I saw this with my children. We lived in a rainforest. The only food they had was the food that I gave them. They ate their salads and their vegetables. They ate well. And there were, some children liked tomatoes, some children didn't like tomatoes, some children liked mushrooms, some people didn't like mushrooms. There's always a few little variations. I remember two of my grandsons, two different parents, didn't like bread. Now that's very, very unusual because most children, if you let them, they will live on bread, they will live on pasta, and they will live on cereal. That's what most children will live on. You see, it's very easy to eat. You don't have to chew it very much, and of course it's tasty. So be very careful on the foods that you introduce to your children. So if a mother says to me, my little one's not interested in vegetables, I say, do they eat meat? Yes. Well, if a child tastes the interesting flavour of meat, they're not very interested in vegetables. And if a child tastes sugar things like lollies, candies, they're not very interested in fruit. So my children never had meat, and my children never had candies or lollies. So they enjoyed the vegetables and the fruit. So be careful how you first introduce food. The best food for a baby is breast milk. Breast milk is best, but not every mother can for various reasons. So the next best thing to breast milk is goat's milk. If you have a look at the baby goat and you have a look at a baby human, they're very similar in size, but have a look at a baby human and a baby cow, baby calf, they're very different. And also scientifically, when you analyse the milks, the goat's milk is much closer to human milk than the cow's milk is to human milk. So the next best is goat's milk. Soy milk can be used, but it's vital that it be non-GMO and organic. Doesn't always tell you if it's GMO or not, but if you use organic, you can be assured that it is not genetically modified. The first foods. When should the first foods be given to children? Well, we're going to look at a bit of science now. The first teeth that a baby gets is 4 at the top, 4 at the bottom, or either way, sometimes 2 at the bottom, 1 at the bottom. But the first teeth that come through are the 8 teeth that make up 4 at the top and 4 at the bottom. They're called milk teeth, and the reason why they're traditionally called milk teeth is because that's what babies should be mostly having still, is just milk. They're called milk teeth. A baby can only bite if the baby's tongue comes out. You see, when a baby sucks, they use their top lip and their tongue to suck. So to bite, the baby has to pull the tongue back and then the baby can bite. So the mother has her mind on that. So if the baby stops sucking, she needs to be mindful the baby might be going to try and bite. And that's when you need to come in quickly and show them that that's unacceptable. No, don't bite them back. No, don't hit their mouth. Quickly put them on the floor and walk out of the room. They will not be happy. And when you come back, smile, pick them up and say, we'll try again. And if they bite again, down on the floor and quickly out of the room. They're not being naughty, they're just trying something, and you need to show them, no, this isn't working, no, we're not going to do that. The mother will scream because it will very much hurt, but that sometimes the baby can think, well, that was an interesting sound. When they have their milk teeth, they're coming through about 7.5, 8 months of age, and I also call this taste time. A baby is ready to eat food when they can sit, when they can feed themselves. So this is happening around 7.5 months, the first teeth come through. You know, sometimes you get a baby that'll have some teeth at 5 months, but that's unusual. But mostly around 7.5, 8 months of age, then the teeth are starting to come through. And this is taste time. So what we used to do, we have the baby in the high chair because they can now sit, they can now feed themselves, and you give them a cucumber. Oh, and they suck away on that cucumber and they think they're very big because they're doing what you're doing. And lots of little tiny bits of cucumber are all on the high chair, and lots of little tiny bits of cucumber all are on the floor. And maybe a few bits of cucumber go in, that's perfectly fine because this is just taste time. Sometimes I would give them the stalk of the cabbage leaf and they can suck away on that. Another is to cut all the corn off a cob of corn and give them that. It just fits in their hand nicely because this is just taste time. Never sit them down and give them something when they're hungry. Always breastfeed them first because their stomachs are not ready really for food yet. It's just taste time. Maybe if they still don't have their next set of teeth, maybe by 12 months, 13 months, you might steam a little bit of cauliflower, steam a little bit of broccoli, steam a little bit of carrot, and let them pick them up, let them see the colour, let them feel the taste of it. Let them feed themselves. I never fed my babies. I never fed them. I waited until they could do it themselves. That's basic common sense, isn't it? The next teeth that come through are the molars. The molars come through here at the back, and the molars are the grinders. The grinders grind grain, and when the molars are fully through, then the glands in the mouth release ptyalin. Ptyalin is a salivary amylase that breaks down starch. So no baby should have starch until the molars are fully through. When the molars are fully through, by now the baby's anywhere between 14 and even 22 months of age. They can sit very well, they can certainly feed themselves. So that's when you can start with maybe the porridges, the cereals, a little bread, some rice maybe. And because they've had taste time and because you haven't mashed anything up, they've learned to chew. When children are just given slop, they don't learn to chew, and chewing is a very important part of digestion. So these are the first foods. So by the time the baby's 2, 2.5, the little toddler, they're eating mostly what the family can eat. I only fed mine at meal times. So you're establishing meal times at a very early age. I also discovered that children are very happy in routine. So doing the same things at the same time every day. I also discovered that children will often say they're hungry when they're thirsty. So it's very important for the mother to have her mind on this, and half an hour before the meal get the child to drink water. So rule of thumb for water would be to 100 pound, you're looking at 2 quarts, 8 glasses. So to 50 pound, you're looking at 4 glasses. So you can sort of balance that out depending on the size, the weight and the height of the child. But the water is very, very important because the water is required by our body to make the digestive juices to break down the food. A lot of children don't want to drink water, but if that's the only liquid they've ever had, they will happily drink water. You can also say, sorry sweetheart, if you don't drink water, there's no breakfast. But you try to avoid confrontations. But if there is, then the child must know that this is the rule. Always smile. Say, sorry sweetheart, you need to have some water. My youngest was terrible at drinking water. He did not want to drink water, and I breastfed him till he was 3. So he'd wanted some breast milk. I'd say, when you've had that little bit of water, he did not want it, but he could not have this until he'd had that little bit of water. So it's important to have the rules in the home, get everyone drinking, and then you're ready for the meal. As I mentioned in my last presentation, don't allow any fuss at the meal table. My children were never allowed to say yuck. They were allowed to say, Mum, I don't really like tomatoes. I'd say, oh really? Well, would you like some carrot? I don't really like cabbage. Okay, what about some lettuce? So there are your choices. And to encourage children to eat salad, you can also make a face, and they have sprouts for hair or shredded lettuce for hair, and then they can have maybe 2 tomato rings for eyes, and for the mouth they can have a pea, and the nose could be a cucumber, so you can play around with that. And also children love to dip. So if the meal's not quite ready, in fact, I would not have the bread on the table because that's all they're going to want to eat. Bring it out last when the meal is eaten. I would also bring the potatoes and maybe the lentils, whatever you've cooked, when half the salad's gone. So when I married Michael, his children were 11 and 13. My children were used to salad. That's what they grew up with. We had salad every meal. But his children were not. And so what I did was I would always put the salad on the table, and I'd make sure that I had the freshest, crispest cucumbers and lettuce. And it's important to make the salad taste delicious. And I always had a very nice dressing. You can make some very nice dressings with olive oil and lemon juice and crushed garlic and salt, even putting a little bit of tahini in to make them creamy. So you make it beautiful. So we would sit down to the meal. Michael would say grace, and you could see Michael looking. You could see his children looking, is this it? Salad? And Michael would say, potatoes? I'd say, oh, they're almost ready. Oh, the lentils are almost ready. And we're hungry because we haven't eaten since breakfast. And my children would get straight into it. So his children would look at Dad, so they'd start to eat a little bit. And when half the salad was gone, then I'd say, oh, the potatoes are ready. Ah, the lentils are ready. So it's important to do that. Because if you sit at the table and you have the lentils and you have the potatoes, everyone just wants to go for the nice roasted potatoes and the tasty lentils. And if they leave the salad to last, not much is eaten. And digestive-wise, the raw food first stimulates the digestive juices. So it's in every way, it's far better to have your salad first. But if you sit at the table and say, no, you can't have the lentils and the potatoes till you've eaten the salad, you get dissension at the table. Mom, I don't like that. So the mother is constantly looking ahead. So in our reason, intellect and judgment, our front part of our brain, that's our prefrontal cortex, this is where foresight is. So the mother's looking ahead. I always say with children, you can read them like a book. You know what they're going to say. You know what they're going to do next. And so the mother is one step ahead. So keep the potatoes in the oven, because I know I like hot potatoes. My husband loves hot potatoes. And if you've got smaller children, you might put out their potatoes and their lentils a little earlier so they cool down a little bit, but you have it away from the table. I also say children are often seafood eaters. What's that? Seafood, want to eat. My daughter's picking a lot of strawberries at the moment, and if there's a bowl of strawberries on the table, the little 2 and the little 4-year-old, they come in, what do they want? So you cover them. So we have the tea towel over them because it's not mealtime yet. So the mother is one step ahead, and she feels her way with all of this. So that's how I got my stepchildren to eat the raw food. And at breakfast time, I'd have a very nice fruit salad with beautiful fruits, and we'd sit down, and there were the sprinkles like the ground flaxseed or linseed and the chia seed and maybe pear cream, and we'd have that. And when it's half gone, then the hot millet or the hot rice or the hot porridge oatmeal or the hot breakfast comes out. Because I also noticed that's all they'll eat. They won't eat the raw. What a mother can do at lunchtime, if it's not quite ready, they can say grace, the little ones can start, but there's cut up raw veggies like carrot, celery, cucumber, maybe snow peas, and they can dip it in something like hummus or guacamole, things like that, the children, and you'll be amazed how much they eat when they're hungry. What about if they're hungry between meals? Well, what the mother has to do at breakfast time, she has to keep her eye on what her little one's doing. Now, in a lot of homes today, people don't eat together, and I think it's a pity. It's important to eat together and have meal times. So the mother watches what the child eats. So we had a rule in our home, the child was not allowed to leave the table. Because what a child will do, they'll have a few mouthfuls and they'll want to go and play with their truck, or they'll want to come and do this. But no, everyone sits at the table. So my little granddaughter, Tilly May, she's 2 at the moment, she wants to sit on Mama's knee or Nana's knee. And so I often used to have the little one on my knee. From about 4 years of age, they're getting a little bit big and they can sit close then. So what you do is you have guidelines. So we always had breakfast at 7:30. We always had lunch at 1:30. We had our main meal at breakfast and lunch because my children were homeschooled. So it was easy for me to do. Now, not every parent can do that. What about if the children are at school? Well, I have a girlfriend and she has the main meal ready when the children come home from school. Are they hungry then? They're very hungry then. So when she sees that school bus coming, she has that platter on the table with the dip. You can make some very nice dips also out of even blended up beans, very nice one out of cannelloni beans, and you put olive oil in there, a bit of garlic and maybe a touch of lemon and salt. And your Lebanese have some really nice dips. Baba ganoush, that's like an eggplant one. Of course, hummus, most people are familiar with hummus. So when the children come home from school, always check, have you had your water? I always say, my grandchildren, have you watered your garden? That's your garden down in there. Have you watered your garden? Are you well watered? Yes, yes, great. Wash your hands and we can say grace and you can begin. And so when that raw, and also eating the raw platters, it gives you time to get the other food ready. One lady said that she started to serve the main meal when the children came home from school, and that would be about 4 o'clock, maybe 3:30. I guess it depends when they come in, depends when the school bus gets in. And she found at first, about 8 o'clock at night, they'd want something else. So she said for a while they just had a banana, or an apple or a pear or a kiwi fruit, something light. But she said after about a couple of weeks they didn't even have anything. I think at first she said they were just in the habit of having something at night. So what I used to do, we have our main meal at either 1:30 or 2, depending on how the school went, but it was usually at 1:30. And what about at night? Well, it depends on the child. Depends on the age, depends on how much they eat. I certainly would not encourage my children to overeat, and this is something else that the parent needs to have their eye on. Because if the food is delicious, sometimes the children can overeat. It's important that the mother have her eye on chewing, especially if the child loves their meal, they might try and eat too fast. So get into the habit of putting the knife and fork down between the meal and chew, 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 chew. So that's also an important one. Once the guidelines are laid down, there's usually not much fuss at the table. And what I find is that other children come to the table and my children are telling them what the rules are. Always smile, always make it a very pleasant experience. And if a child is eating too much, or if a child has, I remember I used to make this soy butter, which was really delicious on the homemade bread, and Michael's daughter, she would have almost more butter than the bread. I said nothing at the table, but after the meal, I took her aside and I said, sweetheart, that's just too much. I want you to take less. I said, have a look at how thick your bread is and just have, a little bit less than that thickness. She came to me about an hour later and she said, thank you. She said, thank you for not saying it in front of the other children. It's very important that you be very mindful of what's important to children and never embarrass the children. So I think this is what the Bible means when it says, fathers, don't provoke wrath and don't stir up anger in the hearts of your children, especially in Colossians 3. I think it's around verse 21, 22, it says, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. When you embarrass them, you can certainly do this. And children have a keen sense of right and wrong, and they do get angry when they feel that they are being hard done by. So always make it very fair, always make it a happy time. One mother told me that they had signs. So if they pulled their ear, it meant you've got too much food in your mouth. Or it might be tapping the nose meant that you're talking with food in your mouth. Or it might be you've got your elbows on the table. That might be the chin. So you could have a list of rules or guidelines and signs, and children love those signs. And so when you tap your nose, they might go and look at them. They might, oh yes, okay, so I'm doing that a little bit wrong. So always have the table to be a pleasant time. Ellen White says, cast off care and anxious thought when you sit to dine. So no controversial issues discussed at the table. If a child did wrong in the afternoon, that's never brought up at the table. If they had trouble at school, that's something that you can talk about later, but not at the table. It does interfere with digestion. One lady said to me, but we are so used to drinking with our meals. I said, you can get out of that habit. Call everyone together half an hour before the meal and everyone can drink their water then. And if a child is thirsty with the meal, if the child is thirsty just after the meal, they can have a few mouthfuls. But ideally, the mother does it before. You see, drinking large amounts with the meals waters down your hydrochloric acid, making it very difficult to digest the meal. So what sort of food would you have for breakfast? So what sort of food to have for breakfast? Some people like a porridge. So that could be oat porridge, it could be a millet porridge, it could be buckwheat. I know the Polish love their buckwheat. It could be quinoa. So some sort of porridge. It may be waffles, and you can make some very nice waffles out of soaked chickpeas and millet, or soaked chickpeas and oats. There are some great recipes for those. So you'd have your grain, and your grain basically, I guess, is your protein. So if you were having a porridge, then you might have maple syrup, or you might have honey on the porridge. You might have a milk, and that milk could be soy milk. Make sure it's organic, or it could be an almond milk, or it could be coconut milk. That makes a nice creamy porridge. And then some fruit, always some fruit. So if the mother's getting things ready, the children might be eating some pieces of fruit while she's getting breakfast ready. So depending on the season, depending on where you live, depend on what's available. I just spent a few days in Mexico, and I think I was having about 3 mangoes a day. They were very, very nice. So it depends on where you are and what's available. So what about your proteins? And your good fats? Your good fats are coming in a little bit in the milks, but your nuts and your seeds. So depending on the age of a child, that depends on how many nuts they have. We always have almonds and Brazil nuts for breakfast. There's the alkaline nuts and the nuts that are high in some essential fatty acids, also great proteins. And I know Brazil nuts very high in selenium, and that's good for the thyroid. Variety is important. So for my little grandsons, they can have 3 Brazil nuts and 4 almonds. So that would be the age of maybe 5, 6, 7. I think a good guy's in the palm of the hand. One lady said, our 3-year-old has 3, our 4-year-old has 4. I said, what does your 80-year-old have? So that's not really, that sort of changes by the time they get to about age 10. But in the palm of their hand, my 6'6" brother-in-law, he can fit a lot more in his hand than me, but he needs more in his hand. So the fingertips on the palm of the hand is a good guide regarding nuts. Also, it's nice to have sprinkle. You know, children love sprinkles, so they can sprinkle with the ground flaxseed, that's high in omega-3. Also the chia seed, you can sprinkle the chia seed, or you can mix the chia seed with even a bit of apple juice, and it goes like a soft jelly. They like that on their breakfast. That's probably a very traditional breakfast. Another breakfast might be some sourdough spelt toast, as we'll look at in our next presentation, where we're going to be having a look at child illnesses. The hybridization of the wheat is contributing to a lot of child illnesses today. So if you do have bread, make sure it's the sourdough. It's a cultured bread, which helps to break down the protein or the gluten in the grain. It is not a sour bread. It should never be sour. The word sourdough basically is referring to the culturing process of causing the bread to rise, which is the bread that traditionally was always made all through Europe. So you might have sourdough spelt, or sourdough kamut, or sourdough enkenhorn. They are the traditional grains, or often called now the ancient grains. They were the traditional wheat before the hybridization process. So you might have a slice of toast, maybe some olive oil. I taught my children to put olive oil on their bread. It is delicious. And then you might have avocado on that, and maybe some savoury lentils or some scrambled tofu. So that's more a savoury breakfast. And again, a few pieces of fruit and maybe some nuts with that. And what about if you have waffles? What would you put on the waffles? Applesauce is very nice on the waffles, and maybe coconut cream or coconut milk. We do a pear crème at our retreat, which is 1 cup of nut, and that's usually Brazil or cashew, and then a tin of pears. Try and get organic, try and get the pears that have been cooked in their own juice. Pour that in and then blend it. Blend it till it's velvety smooth. That makes a delicious cream to put on the waffles or on the porridges. And then with the waffles, slice bananas or pears or different fruits on top, and then you can put the sprinkles over that. So that's another delicious breakfast. So what about lunch? What's the best for lunch? We always have a salad. And depending on time of year, that might be a cabbage salad. It might also depend on what we've got in the garden. It might be a lettuce salad, avocado, tomato, cucumber, grated carrot, celery. It's what you like and what's available. And always some cooked vegetable. My husband's an Irishman, so every main meal must contain some potatoes. Might do potatoes, might do baked potatoes, baked sweet potatoes, baked squash or baked pumpkin, might do stir fry or steamed vegetables, and always a protein dish. So the protein dish might be a loaf or patties made out of ground nuts, grated carrots and gluten-free breadcrumbs. Make some nice ones there. Or it might be something with beans. So it might be a lentil dish or a black-eyed pea dish, or it might be cannellini beans, kidney beans. There's so many different legumes. So it's having something different every day. And there are so many different sauces you can put with them. Don't be boring. Don't just boil them. I've been in some places where that's all they do is they boil them. What about making them magnificent with sauces? One of the first cookbooks I got was an Indian vegetarian cookbook. And so I didn't know what legumes were till I was about 22. So I got this book about the time I was introduced to legumes. I stayed in Punjab, India, it was about 3 years ago now. I was there for 5 days. They said, "What will we feed you?" I said, "I love dal." Okay, dal every meal? I said, dal every meal. So at breakfast, I had dal. At lunch, I had dal. And dal is made with legumes, but you can get a whole lot of different dals made with a whole lot of different types of legumes. So I had 10 meals, and no two were the same. They used different legumes and different flavourings, and it was very nice. I know the Lebanese and Italians, they have some lovely recipes for legumes. So make sure you make them exciting. Make sure you put them with a nice sauce. And you could also end the meal with a few nuts. Nuts are a great source of protein, they're a great source of fibre, they're a great source of the good fats. You can make some delicious desserts too. You can make desserts with chia, mix the chia with coconut cream, coconut milk, bit of soy milk, and maybe some crushed pineapples, something like that, a little bit of maple syrup. That makes a nice dessert. Also, you can grind up dried fruits with dried and also nuts and put them together with a bit of coconut oil, make little balls. I used to make my children dessert about 3 times a week, not every day. There's no need for dessert every day. But children like sweet things, and so you can make a dessert a few times a week. So what about the evening meal? Well, the evening meal should be very light because everyone's about to go to bed. So try and have the evening meal ideally. So if you have your main meal at 1:30, your evening meal could be maybe around 5:30, 6:30, depending on what time the children go to bed. Ideally, you'd like them to, if they do have something to eat, have it, 2 hours before they go to sleep. A banana is a great evening meal because a banana boosts melatonin, which helps you sleep well. Or an avocado with maybe some gluten-free crackers, or a bowl of soup, or a smoothie. So blend up a smoothie with maybe banana, an avocado, maybe some berries, bit of coconut cream. That's quite delicious. So basically depends on the child, depends on their age, depending on what they need. But always remember, when a child says they're starving, they're usually not. Obviously, if they haven't eaten for 5 hours and they've had their water, they certainly could be hungry. But many children say they're hungry mid-meal when it's thirst. The body often doesn't know the difference between thirst and hunger. So it's a good idea to make sure water is available. We had children visit us when we were in the rainforest, and they were used to only juice. So we said, here, have a glass of tap juice. Or we'd say, have a glass of cloud juice. Water and water alone is the beverage that God designed for us to drink. And it also is the only thing that will help thirst. So these guidelines, it's important to establish at a very young age. A lady came to me when I was in Fiji, and she said, my little girl, she's 2.5, she's the youngest of 4 children, and everyone loves this little girl, they fuss over this little girl. That's a problem. Children should never be fussed over. And she's been to the doctor every month for the last 5 months with colds, with sore stomachs. I said, what does the child eat? Oh, she loves sugar biscuits. I think in the US you call them cookies. Every morning she comes out and she smiles sweetly at everyone and points to the cookie jar. And no one has the heart to say no. I said to him, we've got a problem then. You've got to get all the family together and say, our darling little sister, our darling little one is sick. And she's sick because she's eating too many sugar cookies. Sugar is toxic to the body, and it's causing this little girl to be very sick. I said, does the little one like pawpaw or papaya, pineapple, because mango, they live in Fiji? She said no. If a child has just had a sweet sugar cookie, they will not like those fruits. The fruits almost seem bitter because sugar is such a strong sweetener. She said, what do I do? I said, I want you to get all the cookies out of the house. She loves chocolate. Yeah, chocolate has to go. Talk to the father, talk to the grandparents, talk to the other children, because no one likes it when this little one is sick. It's just a horrible thing when the children are sick. I said, all of them have to get out of the house. So the first day when the little one comes out, she looks, the cookie jar's not there. I want cookies. We have no cookies, sweetheart. If she starts to cry, then it's important to put her back to her bed. Say, sorry, sweetheart, you can't come out here if you're going to cry. And if she really puts on a turn, Because what you'll find is children will use three things. They will use bed, they will use food, and they will use toilet. So it is important to make no fuss on the food, no fuss on the bed, and no fuss on the toilet. So if the little one puts on a real turn and she starts throwing things around her bedroom, then you come and you gently take her out onto the veranda, and while she's on the veranda, maybe she throws herself down. That's when you get the bucket of cold water and you throw it over the child. And the child will go, ah! And the mother says, "It's all right, sweetheart, I'm just cooling you down. You were getting a little bit hot there. You are not to behave like that." The little one starts to cry. And so you help the little one get their clothes off and put some dry clothes on, and you get the little one to squeeze out her wet clothes and go and put them in the laundry. The message is that behaviour is unacceptable. See why it's so easy to start when they're this big. It's so easy to start when they're very little, before these habits of tantruming become very well established. But even when they're well established, you can still use the bucket of cold water. One lady said to me, "What about a teenager?" Yeah, it's a bit hard with a teenager. Well, teenagers, you've got to look at what they love. They love their friends, they love their phone, they love their iPad. So if they don't abide by the rules, then the phone gets taken away, the iPad gets taken away. They cannot be with their friends. You've got to work out some consequences. And if the consequences don't hurt, they're going to do it again. So it has to be, there must be consequences for every behaviour. That's why the bucket of cold water over a small child, it's a great tonic. It will not hurt them. It'll give them a shock, but that shock tells them, "No, sweetheart, we don't behave like that." Far better to do it at home so that by the time you go to the supermarket, you don't have to deal with it there. You can't throw a bucket of cold water over a child in the supermarket. But when a child tantrums in the supermarket, I can assure you it's not the first tantrum. It's usually been very well established at home. So with the child that puts on the tantrum because there's no more cookies, make sure the child drinks a lot. Offer them at the meal table, offer them the pawpaw, the pineapple. Oh, now it's lunchtime and now the salads come, the sweet potato, maybe the lentils. And you might find that that little child will not eat hardly anything on the first day. So the good news is by the second day, the child will be very hungry. And so when the child comes, "Oh, there's no cookie jar, no more cookies. Oh, but look, here's some pawpaw, here's some mango, here's some strawberries." Note what the child likes. And you might say, "My child doesn't like any fruit." I will give them a selection. They can try banana, they can try. And if the child wants to spit it out, nope, they must not spit it out. They must always have manners, no matter what age you teach them the manners. And if the child does not want any of that fruit, that's okay. Just make sure the child drinks lots of water. And then by lunchtime, the child is going to be very, very hungry. We don't have fruit now. We have the main meal now. I do not agree in a mother having to cook a whole lot of different meals for different members of the family. This is the meal, and it's a smorgasbord. They can choose what they want. They can choose the grated carrot or the tomato. They can choose the avocado dressing or the hummus. So there are the choices. So the child can choose these things. It can take a couple of days to change the taste of the child. But it's very important to have the father and the mother united, and also the rest of the children united. We had a little girl that I used to mind, and she was only 2. And it was when my youngest was 2, and then my next one was 4, and then all the others. And little Rosie would only drink poppers. Poppers were little fruit juice, little boxes of fruit juice. That's all she would have. She would not eat. She just had poppers. She was a very thin little girl. Her mother and father had split, so it was a divided home. Her father was a white water rafter guide. This was up in the rainforest, so he would bring little Rosie if he had her and also had to work. And I used to watch her with the poppers. She'd just go drink, 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 drink. You could tell she was starving, but she just would drink the poppers. So on the second day that Rosie came, I said to the children, let's teach Rosie how to eat. And the children were all in total agreement. That's right, we've got to get Rosie to eat. I said to the children, one of you hide her little bag that's got all the fruit juices in it, and all the children take Rosie down to the creek while I get lunch. So it was about mid-morning. And I said to them, don't come back till exactly 1:30 and the meal is on the table. They said, yes. And I said, when you're down at the creek, and we have beautiful mountain stream, drink. Drink from the creek. Make sure she has a lot to drink so she's well hydrated. So that's what they did. My children were all very excited about the experiment on how we're going to get Rosie to eat, because both her parents complained that she just wouldn't eat. So they brought Rosie back to the house just on lunchtime. She came into the house and said, Papa! And my children went, look, Rosie, lunch! This was peer pressure at its best. So they swept Rosie over with the rest of the children. They all sat at the table and everyone's ready to eat, and she's just sitting watching everyone. We said grace, and then the children began to eat because they were hungry. Rosie was hungry. Rosie hadn't had any of her poppers. She'd had some water, and you don't make a fuss of them. In fact, you just ignore them. And she's sitting there watching, and she's watching everyone eat, so she had a look and she started to have some. And when she started to reach for something, I said, would you like some tomato? Would you like some cucumber? Would you like to try this? And she ate. And Rosie ate and ate and ate. I don't know whether Rosie had ever eaten so much food. She didn't overeat. Remember, she was just a thin little one, and she was very fragile. She cried at the drop of the hat. She would often be whimpering through the day. She was happy at my house because she had my little 2-year-old William and my 4-year-old Peter, who were like her servants in waiting. They just followed little Rosie around all day doing anything she wanted. But I remember at one point the dog was standing there and he moved round and the dog's tail brushed Rosie's face and she got a little shock, and oh, my boys pushed that dog away and put their arms around her. So we didn't have much crying with Rosie because, you know, she was with other children and children love other children. But the peer pressure at its best was at the meal table, and Rosie ate and ate and ate. And because she'd eaten well, she didn't want any of her fruit juice poppers all afternoon. And when my children had water, she'd have a little bit of water. So when her father picked her up at the end of the day, he looked in the bag and it was still heavy with the little fruit juices. He said, what's this? I said, we got Rosie to eat. He said, you what? He said, we cannot get her to eat. Now, sometimes it can be that a child will play parents against each other. It's almost like a child's power that they're not going to eat and the parents want them to eat. That's why I say, just sit them at the table and let them choose the things that they want. Don't make a big fuss about it. But that's how we got Rosie to eat. So go on a picnic and forget the lunch. Make sure you have lots of water, and when you get home, all that's available is what you want the child to eat. You don't make a fuss. Don't make a fuss at all. In fact, the worst thing you can say to a child at the table, eat this, eat it. Now, you haven't even tried it. No one can digest their meal when that sort of conversation is happening. You just put the food down, you say grace, and then everyone just starts to eat. No one makes a fuss of the little one. They just have their choice. We have seen many children that don't usually eat under those environments. What can you do about grandparents that are wanting to just give the child whatever they want? That's when you have to have a discussion with the parents and just say to them, look, this is the way we want to feed our children, and we really appreciate your support here. And you give them guidelines too. And if the mother says, well, I want to be able to give a treat, And you say, oh, I understand that. You're the grandmother. Well, here are the sorts of treats that you can do. And maybe make the treat going down to the creek for a swim. Maybe make the treat putting the hose outside and having a slide or the sprinkler on. So try not to make all the treats as food. Because the fact is, if a child eats between meals, they're not going to eat much at the next meal. My girlfriends used to say to me, I can't understand why your kids, look, they're eating the salad and the vegetables. My child won't. And then I would say, yeah, but you gave your little one a chocolate bar an hour ago. That'll kill the appetite. And they go, oh, you know, it was just a chocolate bar. Well, that'd be like us eating a chocolate bar this big when you get a 2-year-old eating a chocolate bar that big. Even juice can squash appetite. So let me go back to what I did with Peter. I remember one breakfast he'd had to leave the room so many times that the meal was finished and he was upset, so he really hardly got to eat any breakfast. And I thought to myself, this child is going to be hungry in a few hours. So we finished the meal by maybe 8:15, and he goes off to play. And at 10 o'clock he comes in, Mum, I'm hungry. Now if I give him something to eat now, he is not going to be ready to eat lunch because it takes 3.5 to 4 hours to digest food. Maybe not watermelon. So I could have given him watermelon, but can you see what I'm almost doing then? I'm rewarding the behaviour at breakfast when he had to leave because I'm giving him watermelon. So can you see the parent weighs up all of this? So I said, well, have some water. He had some water, but that didn't last him very long. So let's see, by now it's 11:30 and we're not having lunch till 1:30. I'm hungry. And you don't say, well, no wonder you're hungry, you didn't eat your breakfast. No, there's no need to say that. The children are very smart. There's no need to state the obvious. So I said, okay, if you sit very still, you can have half a glass of carrot juice, half a glass of maybe organic soy milk, just something like that. That will certainly stop the hunger in a child. So it's now 1 o'clock and I'm getting the meal ready and Peter comes in, Mom, I'm hungry. Okay, if you sit on that chair very still, you can have a carrot. Now, how long does it take a 3-year-old to eat a carrot? A long, long time. By the time lunch was ready, the carrot was half eaten. Now, if I'd given him a sandwich then, he's not interested in lunch. But a carrot doesn't take you far and it takes a long time to chew it. So that's what I would do if the child had not eaten very much, and I would do those things to stretch them out until lunchtime. I remember my son Peter said to me once when he was 15, he's 15 now, and I always encourage drink between meals, and he'd say, Mom, I'm hungry. I'd say, have some water. He came to me one day and he said, Mom, I'm starving. And I looked at the clock, I said, oh, great, it's lunchtime. The water wasn't doing it anymore. The water will do it so far, but then it get to the point where the water's not doing it anymore. In everything that I've explained to you regarding feeding children, you can see that unless you have control over your children, unless you've already established the guidelines, you will not be able to implement these things. That's why the first thing we looked at was the mother and father being united on this. The second thing we looked at was the training or the guidelines for children. And now the third one is the food. Hippocrates said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. Notice with little Rosie, she wasn't getting enough nutrition, so she was a very fragile child. Her muscles and her bones weren't actually developing properly because she was not getting any nourishment. So we just had to find out ways to get Rosie to eat nourishing food. As I said, you're always mindful that some children might like some foods more than others. That is true. That's why you give them choices. It can be an apple or a pear, or it can be an orange or a mandarin, or it can be a banana, or it can be grapes. So, there are your choices. Whereas at lunchtime, we've got sweet potato and we've got baked potato. I don't like sweet potato. Okay, baked potato. Don't like baked. Okay, sweet potato. So there are your choices. I don't like lentils. Okay, we'll have the beans. Have the things like that. And so little by little, you can establish their eating habits. And so it got to the point where I was at a shopping mall one day, and it must have been December, because there was a Santa Claus with all his helpers. And the helpers were giving lollies, we call them candies, out to the children. And I think my youngest was maybe 4, so then I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, maybe 12, 13, 16, they're the ages. And the helpers tried to give these candies to my children. And my children just looked at them. They didn't take them. And the helpers are looking at the children. This is unusual. These are the first children today that haven't taken these candies. And then they looked at me and I said, they're allergic. Are they allergic? Every child is allergic. Have you seen the behaviour of a child when they have that sweet thing? It's a toxic poison. It's a highly refined acid is sugar. I said they're allergic. And Santa and all his helpers went, "Ah." And then they looked at my children and they went, "Yeah." And my children giggled and walked away. It didn't bother my children because my children were so well satisfied from their breakfast that was high in fibre, generous proteins, healthy fats, and they're the 3 foods that keep the food in the stomach longer. So they were not hungry. They had no desire for this. And I had taught them the dangers of the sugars. But as I said, sometimes we would have dessert. And the dessert is made with maybe dried fruits. Maybe it's made with maple syrup. Maybe it's sweetened with honey. So there are lots of delicious things that you can make. But remember, the dessert is the cherry on the cake. They can have their dessert when they have eaten their salad, then their potato and their lentils, whatever it may be. That's the reward for them eating the good food. So you can see that feeding children can be quite easy, and this will lead us into our next presentation, which is what do you do when the children are sick, and what can you do to treat basic childhood illnesses. So we'll be looking at that in our next presentation.